capitalism in itself, I mean, I can understand and I can appreciate, maybe not to the level of consumerism we are at today, but the way to motivate people, I can understand. But I really feel like we have a pretty big separation or gap between the people who've done very well and people that haven't done as well. And so I think it's really critical that, or not really critical, it's a way to help distribute wealth in a more equitable and fair way, to recognize their labor contribution and their creative contribution to your company, because it's not just the person who starts it. It's not possible for them to do it all.
Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about the social impact of conscious companies and everyday heroes. Hear inspiring stories from those who put people and planet before profit and personal gain. You'll learn how you can make a difference, vote with your dollars, and get involved today. Here's your host, Corinna Bellizzi.
Hello and welcome to Care More, Be Better. Each week, I invite you to care more about social and environmental issues so that together we can create a better world. Before I get started today, I wanted to share our progress in our not-for-profit effort to plant more trees in 2025. I began this program in January in collaboration with forestplanet.org, and we're planting a single tree for every new subscriber to our email newsletter, to our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Theoretically, if a single person did all four of these things, we would plant 4 trees for them. And I think that's just fine, because ultimately the goal is to make the world a little greener each day. So far this year, we've already planted 7,898 trees. So we're obviously on track to well surpass the goal of 20,000. Now, if you're already a listener and a subscriber in these spaces, I just want to say thank you. You are what makes this effort worthwhile. Every share, every comment, subscription, follow, all of it helps our podcast reach more people. So if you haven't already done so, I'd really love to invite you to write us a review on Apple Podcasts. This is something you can do for any show that you love. It will enable their show to get in front of more people too, because there's something about that written review, those few words from you, that can mean a lot. I also read every single one of them. Today, we're diving into the future of food ingredients, sustainability, and the powerful potential of algae. I'm thrilled to welcome Ben Kelly to the show, a leader, entrepreneur, and industry visionary who's been transforming how we think about nutrition and sustainability for more than 15 years now. He is the co-founder of Algorithm, the award-winning company that helped bring algae-based omega-3s to the mainstream. This is an ingredient I've used and formulas we've worked with, including those of Orlo Nutrition. He now serves as CEO of Better Origin Ingredients, a bold new venture on a mission to rethink the future of food and dietary ingredients. We'll explore how algae is helping replace fish oil and supplements, why systems change is needed in ingredient sourcing overall, and how regenerative thinking can show up in business-to-business models as well as on the front lines. Now, he comes to me today from the prairies of Saskatchewan, and I'm just so thrilled to have him here. Let's dive in and learn how we can all do better by sourcing better. With that, Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Corinna. Thanks for having me.
It's so good to have you here. I'd like to start by inviting you to tell a bit of your personal and professional journey. You've had quite the story, from POS Biosciences in the early days to co-founding Algorithm and now leading Better Origin. What through line connects these experiences?
I think the biggest thing is relearning the impact of everything that we do. So most of my background is in public policy and in economics. I actually ran for member of parliament. It's the equivalent of Congress in the US when I was 21. I was very passionate about making change in the world. And eventually I figured out I felt like I could do that more in business. And so I eventually kind of joined a scientific company called POS, where we were doing foundational contract R&D for everyone from leading entrepreneurs to multinational food and supplement companies. And it was there where I kind of learned how to meld science with business and impact. And then I had kids, and everything I do, I think about them, my 2 young daughters. They've kind of tied everything through after I think through like the commercial professional stuff. Yeah.
Right. Of course. They'll keep you busy too. Has your perspective on sustainability evolved much over the course of your career, particularly as it relates to omega-3s?
Yeah, I would say before I joined POS, I definitely couldn't have told you where omega-3s come from. Like I grew up on the east coast of Canada, and so like, I knew generally eat fish. Fish is good for you, but I would never have known or thought that you could grow the same nutritional lipids in, essentially the same fermentation tank as you grow beer or kombucha in, and the impact that that could have on supply chains for, providing a nutrient that we know the world is, significantly deficient in.
Yeah, powerful, especially in the DHA space, which is mostly grown through that fermentation process, which you're talking about, like in those stainless steel vats that you might brew beer in. I think we've all been to a brewery or a winery and seen what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, I think it's like when people think about, a lot of people used to watch that TV show, How Things Are Made or How It's Made, right? And people don't really ever, I think in lots of parts of my life today, I still don't really think through everything of what goes into the products that I make. Obviously try and be more conscious of the things that we purchase and where they come from and how they're made. But it's just, when you really think about how everything's put together, it's pretty phenomenal what human beings can do.
Well, being somebody who has spent the bulk of my career in the omega-3 space, and first in fish oil and now in algae, I have a knowledge base that probably mirrors your own in certain ways, understanding that fish get their omega-3s, EPA, and DHA from the algae they consume. And having spent a fair amount of time manufacturing products that include it, I understand too how replaceable that omega-3s from fish are, while still having the same nutrient profile. And so I know one of the things that you spearheaded at Algorithm was to kind of define how many fish were saved with the production of this algae oil, if you were to compare them apples to apples. Where do you think that is on a global scale now, if we were just to look at the algae-based omega-3 as a whole, beyond what you've personally worked on? It's a big question. I'm just like, if you could imagine.
Yeah. So, the first thing I would say is, we used to call that an algorithm. We used to call it fish math. And I have to give all of the credit to our former director of marketing, Katie Phillips. That was really her brainchild. And she did everything, marketing people you think are more creative and stuff, but she did everything from like digging and understanding, generating all the resources to compare, and then really like building actually all the Excel tables to do the math to generate everyone's fish math number every year. So all the credit to her. She did it, but it was a phenomenal way to visualize and allow our customers and our team, especially the team internally too, to understand the impact that they were having in the world. And actually, I guess maybe the genesis of the idea originally came from a company called Chemin Nutrition, who you probably also know in the industry. And I visited them a long time ago, and they have a calculator where they calculate each day in their finance department how many people their ingredients touch in the world. And I always thought that concept internally of taking something that people, they don't understand what they're doing every day, I guess, like the impact of it. And so when Katie proposed it, I was like, that's a phenomenal way to give our customers something to talk about and give us something internally to celebrate and work, build it up and build it forward.
Yeah, a metric, having something that you can measure. What is the impact you're making, But
then like in total today, I still think the algal industry itself is still, very small.
It's nascent. Amazing that it's still nascent, right?
Yeah.
What is the percentage overall? Less than 5?
I think it's less than 5% of global omega-3 consumption. But I think the really interesting part for Better Origin and as we go forward is the world, and I think both generally in the public, but especially in the industry, understands that the level of fish oil that can be produced in the world has been flat generally for about a decade. And so we know that additional fish oil for supplementation is generally, like, I'm not saying there aren't places where things will become available or where fisheries might recover because we've done some conservation, but in general, that level is not going to go up. And you, at the same time, you have an omega-3 market at the consumer level that's growing at a compound growth rate of 3 to 5%. So you have the equivalent of a new algal oil market being created each year in demand, and that demand is not going to be serviced generally from fish. And so I think it's really interesting, and it's why if you look at the ingredients that we represent and sell in Better Origin, why it's so interesting to look at alternative sources of omega-3s, and whether that's from algae, which is a really amazing technology and approach to producing EPA and DHA, and predominantly DHA today, or things like acai flour, which are really, we call it the nature's most abundant omega-3. It's rich in ALA like flax, but also has SDA, which is another omega-3. In total is close to 65% omega-3 overall. And that can be grown regeneratively. So I think it's sources like this that are really going to have the biggest impact going forward if consumers are going to continue consuming plant-based and sustainable omega-3s.
But there is a big difference, though, between something like an alpha-linolenic acid and omega-3 EPA or DHA, which is more directly available and affects inflammation systemically in the body. So, even the ahi, I always thought it was ahi, like ahi tuna, but I'm it might be ahi. It's AHI, and it's a flour, and it's been used as a novel ingredient, but similar in certain ways to chia seeds, because chia also has omega-3 in it, just not EPA or DHA. And the same applies to the high flour. So most of the research in the omega-3 space is on EPA and DHA, either together or somewhat separate. There's some research on unopposed EPA and also unopposed DHA, meaning that you don't have that much of the other fat present. Whenever you're dealing with fish oil, there's always some of both, because they eat different strains of algae, and different strains of algae produce different omega-3s. At any rate, that's getting way into the weeds. But I think from that top line perspective, if we start to understand the impact of our actions when we buy, when we consume, then we can actually engage with living a little bit more sustainably. When I learned, for instance, that a single bottle of our omega-3, when I only considered, and this is with Orlo Nutrition. I work with Vaxa Technologies. We commercialized Orlo Nutrition as a consumer-facing brand. We actually grow at Vaxa the algae that produces EPA. And then we procured the DHA from you, a non-GMO source. Also, this was from Algorithm at the time, but that would provide DHA, and you gave us the metrics for what we were covering with that. Based on our math alone, our fish math, if you'd have it, the omega-3 from our EPA that was in a single bottle was equivalent to 110 sardines or anchovies, like 110 small fish that we had saved from being, squished and extracted for their omega-3s. Similarly, when we added in yours, it was like, okay, well, this might be closer to 200 now that we consider this DHA impact. And so we created a fish counter that's up on the website for Orlo Nutrition, which shows you how many millions of fish that have been saved in the short time we've been a mostly direct-to-consumer brand, but in part to help people understand they're making a difference. And, having come from that earlier fish world and understanding that fish stocks are relatively flat and that most of the fish that people consume are, at least in the West, are coming from the Peru anchoveta, that they are mostly sardines and anchovies. So there's some little targets that might have like the different species like cod or pollock or salmon oils that are out there, but mostly it's sardines and anchovies. And that the fish stocks are finite, that they'll let you know how many you can get this year. And then all the fishermen are jockeying to get their cut of that amount, right? Well, in recent years, the Peru anchoveta has started to say, well, we might allow for a smaller mesh size for our nets, which is like a flat admission. It's a flat admission that they were going to allow overfishing to occur because they'd now be capturing more juvenile fish who hadn't necessarily helped the populations replenish that year, And that for me was very, very concerning, especially as I understand that illegal fishing still takes place off the coast of Peru. And in fact, 15,000 dolphins a year are killed off the coast of Peru, in part because local fishermen see the dolphins as competition for the very fish that they're trying to get, not for meat. So it's like, when you look more deeply at these things, it gets really concerning. And the fact is that 99.9% of society really doesn't know these things. It's only those that are deeply entrenched in the society, because it's hard to look at and it's hard to admit. It's also hard to say, oh crap, like we're out consuming our ability to survive. And if we're out consuming our ability to survive, then something has to change. And people really don't want to change their lifestyles.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, even people in the industry is your, obviously given your background, like, and you would be more educated than a lot of people around fish oil, and people don't understand. And I can give you a perfect example. There's I think he was a former New York Times investigative journalist, and I just forget the name of the series he put out, but anyway, he was covering illegal fishing and challenges with law and order on basically anything outside that 200-mile economic zone of all countries, and then like all the issues with like how companies flag vessels in different countries, and they tend to pick countries where there's not going to be any enforcement, and so like you basically have this wild west out on the ocean, and in particular, as he dove into all this research, when he really started to talk about China, I don't mean to single anyone out, but Chinese supported illegal fishing, I did not understand the depth of what was going on. So you have an outboard fishing fleet that is largely based in China for their domestic consumption and so on. And it's larger than any navy in the world. I understand from what he was reporting. It receives support from the Chinese government using satellite technology, and literally you can watch them. I think Sea Shepherd and some of them have followed them and take a video and show and you see them all light up to do it's like jellyfish, that food we all calamari, and they use the spotlight to bring the calamari up to the top of the ocean, and then they harvest, right? And you see them all park in one place, light up, do their fish, and then you'll see them an hour or a couple hours later turn off at the same time and then move. And they're doing this all outside of each country's economic zone, 200-mile economic zone, so you don't really have any influence. But I don't think anyone, including many governments who don't have the resources, has any idea how much of this type of activity goes on. And I'm sure China's not the only bad actor. So
no, they're definitely not. And the thing is, like, it's not just a conspiracy theory. This is something that has been documented, but that is easily something that all these different industries work to hide. They work to hide the data. And I've even seen stories that suddenly disappeared. Like, wait, why can't I find this thing? It's just gone. It's scrubbed from the internet, right? And so you really have to have a critical eye and let's just say, a desire to be almost journalistic in your approach to the news around this particular topic. Seaspiracy did a very good job of highlighting the core issues. And so people can get to a space where they can understand, if they watch that film, which is available on Netflix, called Seaspiracy, like sea piracy or sea conspiracy, which really does talk about the pirating of our oceans, the illegal fishing that takes place. You mentioned Captain Paul Watson's founded company, the not-for-profit Sea Shepherd. He's no longer affiliated. He felt like they weren't getting activistic enough anymore and going up head-to-head against the illegal whaling industry enough. So he founded a new company, a new organization called the Captain Paul Watson Foundation. They're actively doing that work, and quite aggressively. He spent, I think, the better part of the last year in jail. He was arrested for their efforts in, I want to say it was one of the Nordic countries, and they wanted to extradite him to Japan, where he probably would have been done away with. But he went against the extradition order and was released earlier this year. It's all really crazy in a way that you have to be that like, I think he got released just before Christmas. Anyway, I'll correct that and put it in show notes so that people can look at that data too. But Seaspiracy really does tell, I think, a stark story. You learned that that blue seal, like, look for the blue seal, Marine Stewardship Council certified, doesn't mean more than the company that offered that product agreed to fish within these sustainable limits as defined, but they don't have anyone out there patrolling, right? No one's out there to prove that overfishing isn't happening. No one's out there to prove that illegal fishing isn't happening because the ocean is vast and it would take incredible resources to try and stop it.
Yeah, and you think about, like, my understanding is like a lot of new fish for food consumption, a lot of it has been established in Africa and other countries where the governments don't have the resources to take care of their local population. They certainly don't have the resources to build a navy to police corporations that are setting up in their jurisdiction and then flagging their vessels to their jurisdiction so that there is no consequence. And even if there was a consequence, it's not going to be enforced. The world's just so big and finite resources wherever you look. So
yeah, but the haul from a single boat could be in the millions too. So that's the other piece that keeps this happening, right? You have enough of incentive. You have enough incentive to keep doing the work. Especially in things like the larger bodied fish like tuna and whales. So there's definitely a market for them, and they can be worth a lot of money. And that's really what it comes down to. It's a resource war.
I apologize to ask maybe a dumb question, but why do they hunt whales anymore? I just actually don't know, and I should just go read, but I've never understood this. Like, I know a long time ago we used to hunt whales for like the blubber to for lamps and stuff like this, but I don't understand today. And I watched Seaspiracy. I know they cover a lot of the dolphin calls, but I didn't. I don't remember. Is it for the meat? Like, I don't particularly remember anything that was like,
So there is basically a dark market for meat as a delicacy. The minke whale is a whale that is commonly whaled off the coast of Norway, Iceland, up around Sweden. It's a meat that I've been at the dinner table when somebody ordered whale, when I was working with Nordic Naturals up there, and it looks very much like steak. And texture and thickness and robustness. You're talking about a mammal in the ocean. So it's a seafaring mammal. And I imagine that dolphins probably taste remarkably similar. So it might even be gray marketed as something else where they say, oh yeah, we've got this whale, but it's actually a dolphin. Not that the distinction doesn't matter that much to me. It's still illegal fishing, but, makes a difference in its marketability. And so, especially in Asia and in the Nordic countries, there are still a lot of people who enjoy eating whale. Why? Because people like to eat different things. We dove a little bit deep into the Seaspiracy world, which can be a little troubling, a little more than troubling for a lot of people, especially those that love whales and dolphins. But really, the climate impact of what we're talking about is pretty big. And so if we are to really think more sustainably in ways that we can replace some of these nutrients or ways in which we can improve supply chains so that there's less waste, I'm really curious to see what you're seeing as far as systems changes or industry impact, like how you're now working to be part of the solution with algae or other types of products.
In every company I've been a part of, fortunately for me, I've been pretty lucky that I've always been taught that companies shouldn't work in service of profit exclusively. Companies obviously need to be profitable in order to have an impact, meet some of like things that investors and things like that need. But every company I've been fortunate to be a part of has had that point of view. And so when I get to start Algorithm and then and we will do it more in Better Origin as we get a little bit bigger, we really look at systemic changes starting even just like with small things in our local community. And then as we get bigger, we're able to do more and have a bigger impact. But so in Algorithm, we used to do, there's a few different things. We used to, we do like just go as a team and pick up garbage along the river shoreline here in Saskatoon. In the winter, no one likes to think about winter in Saskatoon because it gets to minus 40 Celsius. And we actually, because we have a large Indigenous population, not because of that, but we have a large Indigenous population that has, multi-generational traumatic experiences and it leads to quite a bit of homelessness. And so you have a lot of people in Saskatoon, like far too many, that are on the streets in minus 40 winters. And it's challenging to see as someone who's pretty privileged. And so we used to do every year something. We'd either volunteer at the local food shelter or food bank, or we did this thing originally before COVID called Socks and Sandwiches. We would donate. We'd use cash to buy socks, and then make sandwiches for a day or two at the shelter. So we really believe that, and we carve out time for the team and for individuals to figure out how they can best impact. And so I think most important, to answer the broader question, I think the most important thing is that the company itself from the very beginning or at any time it chooses to kind of change it needs to make systemic changes to empower the team and create a culture where people want to do more, and want to give back in their own way. And sometimes you can have company directed things that help maybe match the company mission, and you're trying to align everyone to that. But I'm really a true believer in carving out time to let everyone make a positive impact in their own way. I think that's really important, because when you really care about something, and it just feels more real, and you want to do it again. It's not just like something you have to do for work. And so yeah, I think it starts at the company and then goes from there.
Yeah. Well, I love the ethos. And I have to say, I think I can hear your kids playing in the background. It is Good Friday as we're recording. So to everybody who's taking a little time off for spring break, they'll have a little taste of what it's like if they don't already have kids. Now, I love that you're focused on, this perspective of living well by doing good, of being cognizant of your impact on your local community. And even a mention of, the people who are native to the land and the generations of trauma that they might have experienced. It's a powerful thing to even state in this sort of a effort. I understand that you're really working to create a space for people to work with Better Origin that is truly better, that enables and empowers the people that work with you, I believe even through a stake in the company. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's another part of the ethos I've been very fortunate to be a part of. So even from my first job at POS, where actually my father was the CEO, and pioneered taking the company from a not-for-profit that was created by the government into a for-profit employee-owned entity. And in that company, we all put in money, and eventually we did sell the company, and everyone did very well. But I think, and then an algorithm and now a Better Origin, everyone will be an owner. It's capitalism in itself. I mean, I can understand and I can appreciate, maybe not to the level of consumerism we are at today, but the way to motivate people, I can understand. But I really feel like we have a pretty big separation or gap between the people who've done very well and the people that haven't done as well. And so I think it's really critical that, or not really critical, it's a way to help distribute wealth in a more equitable and fair way to recognize their labor contribution and their creative contribution to your company, because it's not just the person who starts it. It's not possible for them to do it all on their own.
Well, and that type of an ethos likely means that you're not earning 20 times what your lowest paid employee is. Like, I would imagine you follow more the ethos of what the Dr. Bronner's soaps, for example, their CEO, who's a founder's child, essentially, right? Their CEO is earning at most 5 times what their lowest paid employee is paid. And I think that ethos helps to support an employee-based feeling very much that they are part of the overall story of success, rather than, oh, well, I'm serving this dude who's off in the glass tower. You see what I'm saying? Which is a different perspective and which feels far more oligarchical. I think that's a word. If it isn't, I'll just make it. I think people know what I mean. Now, I wonder too, if you're looking at this whole process, and given the times that we're in, which from a trade perspective are quite challenging when you're dealing with a bulk of your business or a lot of your business coming from the United States, I wonder what you see presently happening and if you think the impact is going to be far reaching insofar as ingredient movement from Canada to the United States and vice versa, or how this is going to impact that end of business, understanding that you work in the supply chain for things that people consume, supplements, food additives, things along those lines.
Yeah, I think it's been wild. I think it was April 5th. I mean, we had to get, just like everyone else. I mean, even we were reading about Apple flying. I think it was like 5 or 7 747s from China before the tariff deadline. Like, I think it was
the skin of your teeth.
Yeah, pretty mad scramble. Because we're in the business of moving physical goods essentially, and so things got to go. So it's been super interesting, but I think the part that worries me the most about all of it is the unintended consequences that even the people that are thinking through everything may not be considering. And one, I was just reading on LinkedIn today that there's someone in the industry who imports things from China because a lot of ingredients come from China for the diet ingredient industry. Like I think the number's over 80%. I don't have a data point for that, but that's my rough guess. Anyway, they pointed out, they're like, you would think that with nothing moving from China, the freight rates from China would be dropping. But what's actually happening, because they're currently moving goods, is that because there is no freight moving from China to, especially the United States, those boats are just sitting there. And so what you're happening is your freight rates actually going up because boats are sitting there waiting until they get full cargo. And then so because there's limited boats going, you have people bidding for rates. And so like my guess is that people didn't think that, wouldn't have expected that. And I think if you look at all the impact from COVID, however many years ago, 3 years ago, and how long it took for those supply chain challenges to get worked out.
It was easily 6 months for a lot of the ingredients, easily.
Oh yeah. And like I think you still saw freight rates like 2 years later, like 2022, you had people that had excess inventory, you had freight rates that were still higher. So like I just don't think everyone fully grasps yet, and I'm not saying I do either, but I just think there's more consequences coming that no one's really thinking about yet, and as we encounter them, we'll just have to find a new solution. Not much else to do.
Well, think about packaging, just as a for instance. Like right now, I have some packaging I'm reviewing. This box came from China because almost all packaging is essentially made in China. And I've been looking at different aluminum bottles that I might be able to use, as we transition from only offering products at Orlo in a pouch to something else. And, the only supplier that has minimums within what's reasonable for us for something like a jar like this is out of China. Like every other manufacturer is asking for a minimum of like 30,000. This is a minimum of 5,000, right? So much more digestible, especially to test and make sure you have market acceptance, right? I can do part of a line in this package and make sure that it's something that's going to work for our partners in Iceland or in Israel or here, in the United States. And then we have the option to do things like print directly on the bottle. So there's even a sample of a bottle. This is not ours, but like it's just an example of what they can do to print right on it, eliminating the need for a plastic label, right? So you're cutting down on other material use by using this method. There's another bottle manufacturer of this style in South America, but I'm still going to have to deal with higher tariff rates to bring that in. And then I have to go to 30,000 units, which makes it untenable for a market test. I basically have to say, okay, we're making the shift. It's happening. Here we are. And in that case, you're having to buy a lot more, and it may not be ideal for your company. It'll become harder to exit startup phase if all of this actually comes through the way it's presently planned and being presented. It'll be harder for new companies to come up and succeed. And so entrepreneurship will falter, and you'll see, and maybe this is part of the intention. Maybe it's very intentional that then the only people who can succeed are those that already have very deep pockets and are very large employers and, right? So then it is on the technology space, the Apples, the Googles, the Microsofts, right? And and the phone space, you might have Mitsubishi has like a very durable phone, but I doubt that one will survive, right? Like it would end up being the iPhones and who else makes phones these days? Right, Samsung. Like that's what I use exclusively, right? But at the end of the day, these things are going to get much more expensive. It'll get harder to actually exercise product development because these are not systems that you can turn on a dime. And in the ingredient space, there are certain things that only grow in China. That's where they're sourced from. So are we going to suddenly start growing these things in other spaces? Probably not. So, where else am I going to get Panax ginseng from? Just for example, if I'm working on a product that contains ginseng.
I think aren't most of the synthetic vitamins in the world made in China? I'm pretty sure that's true. Like I understood there's only one vitamin C plant outside of Scotland as one example. So like it's just think of it also too, like if you think about after the war in Ukraine started and how dependent Europe was on Russian natural gas and like as much as everyone wanted to just like turn it off and stop right away for a variety of reasons, like we built a world that's very global and interconnected. And in my background, public policy, right? You get lock-in effects. You get people who are now dependent on it, and to come back from that, well, maybe it's possible. It's not easy.
Well, and we've encouraged hyper specialization. Yeah, I think I totally agree. It's not clear what's going to happen, and we actually encouraged hyper specialization. Okay, you want chips, you go here. You want aluminum bottles, you go there. You want to work with a canning facility, you go here. Like even within the United States, there's only a couple spots where, for instance, beverages are canned, right? And so you can't necessarily just go down the street and get it done locally here, even though so much actual packaging happens in California. I don't even know if there is a cannery like that in California. To my knowledge, most of them are in Arizona, Colorado, and a couple other spots like somewhere like Indiana, something like that, But it goes to show that it's not as simple to just turn a switch, right? And even then, the materials that they're using to run the packaging machines are coming dominantly from China. So what do you do?
I think you make a really good point about even the hyper specialization within the U.S. Like it's not like each state does everything that they need for within that state, right? It's spread out. And same in Canada, right? We have different provinces that have different things that they specialize in. Not all of Canada makes wheat and canola, right? That's mostly Western Canada. So yeah, it's I don't know. It's an interesting problem to come back from or figure out new solutions for.
Yeah, for certain. Wow. So I wonder if thinking about this, if you could change one thing about the food ingredient industry overnight, even in the face, like maybe it is changing the trade war, but if you could change one thing, what would it be?
It's an interesting question. I guess the simplest answer would be, a little bit more clarity, policy-wise right now would help. But I think one thing I've valued a lot coming up in the ingredient industry, and I guess maybe wouldn't change, but would hope could expand a little bit more and happen more cross-functionally instead of by category. And I know there are some other organizations that kind of lead this work, but I really think one of the things that's been super interesting coming up in the omega-3 industry is how much collaboration there is between companies and just a willingness to be open, transparent, and look for solutions together. I think that's an ethos I can get behind, and even if you don't see eye to eye on everything all the time, it's instead of everyone trying to relearn everything, it makes things move forward quicker. So
Yeah, I feel like also answering that question for our audience, if I could change one thing, I'm going to assume these trade issues are taken care of in one way or another. It's too complex. I can't turn back what Trump does. It's just not possible. So I'm going to just stay in a different perspective. I think I would erase counterfeit nutrition. And this is a problem because you'll have something like an ingredient that gets used commonly in baby formulas. And suddenly they're using this thing other than milk that's actually poisoning babies. Like, why would we ever do that? melamine in baby formula. Are you kidding me? Like, this is something that should never happen, and yet it does. So if I could change one thing overnight about everything in the nutrition category, it would be that there would be no more counterfeit anything. This has also happened in olive oil, which got some coverage, where like things that were flavored to be like olive oil actually had zero olive oil in them, and yet were called olive oil on the shelf. And, it was a lie. And the only way to prove it was to actually test it. And what was being shown is that it was just a cheap canola oil or soybean oil that was given a little food coloring and flavor to taste like olive oil. So that's terrible. That should never happen. And I wish it never did.
I think, I know this also happened in, Korea used to be a very large krill oil market. And I understood shortly before the KFDA basically banned all krill oil, the reason they banned it was they were seeing canola oil or other vegetable oil that was dyed red and just
with astaxanthin or whatever. They might have actually put astaxanthin in there, or they might not have.
But I agree. Like counterfeit, low potency products puts a bad name on everyone. I think a company that's done a very good job. I found Now Foods has been running testing programs on specific subcategories and publishing all the results, and I've been following it because it's really interesting to see like what's going on. And the thing is, some of it's obviously very intentional, but I think some of it is also unintentional and a misunderstanding of formulation challenges with certain ingredients. So like, for example, things like glutathione or creatine that will break down in the presence of water, and most formulations need water. And so if you don't know what you're doing, you're just dependent on a contract manufacturer. I think that's one thing that's changed in the industry too, even in the last 10, 15 years, as long as I've been in here, is that I think brands typically before, a lot of them were very deep and technical and did a lot of in-house formulation and a lot of understanding of what they were making. Not exclusively today, but I think generally today brands are more, TikTok, Amazon focused, more.
And they rely on contract manufacturers, sales. Right? That's what you're saying. They rely on contract manufacturers. Yeah. Most of the contract manufacturers have reputable chemists and food chemists on hand, but not everybody's working with the most reputable of them. So they want a cheap product that that never sees their own physical location. It just goes literally from the manufacturer to Amazon warehouses. So there's no accountability really, right?
Yeah.
I've seen that. I have a for instance, and it came from, okay, you work in the world of fats. I work in the world of fats, right? There are certain things that you just know, like you're not going to put an omega-3 in the same capsule with an iron because the iron is going to oxidize the omega-3, and oxidation is already a problem in an omega-3 product. So you want to be really clear that you're not going to do that. But then I saw people pushing formulations across my desk where they wanted to include all these nutrients, and I'd be like, look, this isn't going to work with that. This ingredient's not going to work with that. Like, they're actually going to create problems in the soft gel itself, and the soft gel will fall apart or the oil will go rancid. So the only way to tackle those sorts of things is if you really wanted to micro encapsulate some of these nutrients inside some sort of shell inside the oil, which is what Ritual's approach has been. And I'm just like, why bother? Just take your oil and take your supplement that can't be in the oil separately, and you'll get more of each of them, and it'll probably be a better product overall anyway. But people want an easy solution, and sometimes there just isn't. You can't just combine everything. It's just the way it is. Wow. So I know that this has been perhaps an unconventional conversation. We've stepped into a few realms that are kind of impossible, hard to talk about, like things like the seaspiracy that's happening, or illegal fishing around the globe, fraudulent ingredients that have been offered into marketplaces, sometimes without the manufacturer who's creating the product ever knowing that that's what was happening. Yeah, I wonder what closing reflections you might have to offer. What message you'd like to leave our audience with?
Well, I guess I would say first, thank you again for having me. And I think there exists in the world opportunities for everyday consumers to look for products that maybe take a little bit more education, a little bit more learning, but address some of the things that I think they actually care about. And so I think when you look across kind of lots of the things that we've talked about, you have issues with either contamination or sustainability or fraud, either food or supplement fraud. And so I think the more the consumer pushes, and that's something I've learned through my experience moving from contract R&D through to B2B and dealing with brands more and more directly. I think the more the consumer pushes for change and digs a little deeper, I think that is going to move the industry further than most things that the industry itself will do. So I just encourage all the consumers listening that read a little bit more, do a little more research, and find a product that really aligns with your perspective and what your interests are.
Yeah. And to avoid some of those potentially counterfeit products, maybe don't buy products that are only offered on third-party sellers like Amazon. They have their own website, maybe some deeper
Use the
information,
local store.
provide you with some accountability or tracking. All of those things are important, especially for things that you're going to consume, right?
100%.
Well, I want to thank you for what you're working to do with Better Origin up in Canada, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, building a company that is employee owned and operated, ensuring that you're working to do things a little better on the supply side. I hope that the trade issues that we've confronted aren't too cumbersome to manage and that we can continue our collaborations in the years to come. And I will just say that I think the way you're working to fuel your business is admirable. And I hope more people will take on that mantle of building a responsible business that isn't purely centered on profits, because fact is, long term, that won't save any of us. If there's one takeaway that I have from today's episode, it's really this. When we rethink our inputs, the ingredients that fuel our businesses and our bodies, we can spark ripple effects of regeneration or of sustainable nutrition that go far beyond the bottom line. As always, I invite you to dig deeper. Visit the show notes for this episode, which will include more information on Better Origin ingredients, direct links to their site, and to Ben's connections on social media. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with a friend. Leave us a review. Tell us what you loved. Even stick it to us if you didn't love something. And so that together we can ultimately move in a more positive direction. Your support will continue to help us grow, and we'll even plant more trees when you subscribe to our podcast and to our newsletter. Together, we really can do more and be better. So until next time, I hope you'll stay curious, stay connected, and stay committed to doing good.
Thanks for listening to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for social good. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share with your friends to help us reach more people and spread more social good.